Pessoal, bom dia. Hoje eu estou aqui com uma presença bastante ilustre aqui no canal. É uma honra imensa, inclusive, recebê-lo aqui. Já é uma entrevista que já há bastante tempo também quero trazer, né, para aqui para o canal. A gente não vai tratar aqui certamente da Era Viking dessa vez, mas a gente vai tratar do período anglo-saxão, que teve também impactos depois também, por ser do período germânico, em alguns eventos da Era Viking, mas é um processo que é muito interessante a gente conhecer, porque são achados que foram assim importantíssimos, não só para a história da Inglaterra, mas como também do período germânico. E o nosso convidado vai justamente apresentar sobre essas maravilhas que foram encontradas, que são justamente os achados de Sutton Hoo. Professor Paul Mortimer, it's a big pleasure receiving you here. It's amazing have your work here in the channel. You have a lot of objects that are so interesting for us to show about the Sutton Hoo. That was an amazing discovery in the 20th century that show a lot of the Anglo-Saxon aspects. So thank you so much for being here in the channel.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So for us to start the interview, I would like to know how do you start your interest for the Sutton Hoo finds and for doing all the structures for your chart that you can, as a reenactor, how do you start the idea for?
Oh, well, I've always been interested in this period, right from being a very young boy, actually. But sometime in the 70s, when I was still young, I knew about Sutton Hoo, but at the British Museum they had an exhibition, and I was captivated. I particularly by the helmet. I just thought it was wonderful, weird, and I wanted one, and I couldn't get one. But I've had several different ones by now. Excuse me, my throat's a bit
No problem.
weird. But I was very fortunate to meet a very good craftsman called Dave Roper, who we formed a partnership, and he made lots of things for me. And I wanted to understand what it was all about, how they work together, because the archaeological reports are archaeological reports. They tell you what's there. They put forward some ideas, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to really fully go as far as I could in trying to work out what these things actually meant. And we found out a few things in the making, so which has generally been accepted. So that's been a very valuable experience. Thank you.
Oh, that's fantastic. Your work with reenactor of Redwald, the king of the spirit, is amazing, because we saw a lot of details in these pieces. And I will share my screen that you send me the photos.
Yeah.
For us start our discussion about aspects of this.
Hello.
Of these pieces. So
I see.
Do you see the photos?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Let's start with this photo. It's an amazing picture for me. It's fantastic to saw. For me, what's one of the most questions that I have to say? Who is the man behind the mask for the Sutton Hoo? It's King Redwald, or he have other name? What's the person that we have in the founds of the Sutton Hoo?
Well, nobody knows for sure. I mean, there's some circumstantial evidence which points towards Redwald, and he's usually suggested as the person. But it might be his son, Ragnhera, who was killed in the north of England. It could be another relative, who was probably a king. I mean, I don't think it's personally in my mind. There's no doubt that the burial belonged to a king, because it's the most lavish burial that's ever been found, and because this stuff is so well made. But we mustn't also forget that there were other really important burials at Sutton Hoo, most of which were robbed. There was another ship burial, for instance. Mound 2 had a ship which was almost as big as the Mound 1 burial, which is the famous one, but that was robbed probably by somebody following the orders of our Queen Elizabeth I in the 16th century. And that there were indications that was every bit as lavish as Mound 1, and perhaps some of the other burials were too, but they pretty much all been comprehensively robbed. But so was it Redwall? Well, we'll go along with the idea that it was Redwall, but it may not have been, but no one could be certain. But if it was Redwall, he was a great king, and the cleric Bede writes about him about 150 years later and tells us he was a great king who won many battles.
Oh, that's fantastic. So we have a person that in nowadays have a lot of doubts who is the person that assumed all these finds that was find in the mounts of Sutton Hoo, and that's very curious about that. And we have nowadays have a popularization of this topic because Netflix made a move about that called The Dig that started how finds, and we finds interpret the amateur archaeologist that find the finds of Sutton Hoo. And one of the most interesting aspects is how we can say about the finds of Sutton Hoo, how they start the idea for the excavations
Right.
to find all the pieces.
Well, the site was owned by a lady called Mrs. Edith Pretty, and her husband had died, and she had one son, and there was always rumours that she owned that land, and there were mounds on the land, but they were overgrown. I mean, they were you probably wouldn't have seen very much, but she knew they were there. And it always she was deeply interested in archaeology. For instance, she'd visited the pyramids in the early 20th century. She also was quite a powerful woman. That she trekked across Iceland on a pony for months during one expedition. But anyway, there'd always been local rumours that there was stuff in the mounds, and she decided in 1938 that she would excavate them. She asked Ipswich Museum to send along an archaeologist, and they did. They sent along a chap called Basil Brown, who he's often called an amateur, but he wasn't. He actually he was a self-trained archaeologist. He taught himself, but he was very good and very careful. And he was actually paid, so he was quite a professional, really. He'd also written a book about astronomy, so he was a very clever man. In 1938, he dug up 3 mounds, I think. And have you seen the film The Dig?
Yeah, I think the film is fantastic in some points about this.
Well, the film compresses it into 1 year. But it wasn't. It was actually a 2-year campaign. Mm-hmm. And incidentally, myself and Dave Roper, we were consultants on that film, and we supplied props as well. But anyway, Basil, in 1938, he dug up a number of mounds, but they'd all been robbed, including Mound 2, which I told you about earlier, where he found the evidence of a ship and a little bit from a drinking horn and a couple of other little bits. They packed up for the winter, and he came back in the spring of 1939, and he began to dig Mound 1, and it became very apparent that this was a very important find indeed, because it hadn't been robbed. There'd been an attempt to rob it, but they'd missed the actual center of the grave by about a meter. And we know that it was people from the time of Elizabeth I, because they left a pot down there that was from Tudor times. So, but they had they hit the grave, we would have any of this stuff. You just wouldn't know about it. So that's the campaign for the digging. He when he realised how important it was, he called in help from elsewhere, and famous archaeologists basically took over. Mrs. Pitty insisted that he should remain on the dig. So we thank Basil Brown for his very careful excavation, and it was he was very good at what he did, and Mrs. Pitty honoured him. So that's pretty important, really.
That's amazing. So they how can I say, researching for you, and you have made some consults for the film
We
to
did.
explain how to do some details about how we can use this in the film.
That they used all the jewels from my sword and my I can't remember which other bits, but you never see them in the film. But when the actress Lily James hands a pyramid to Basil Brown, that's one of my pyramids, and they actually lost one. They had to find it because they had them both and they were partially buried, and they actually lost one and had to find it with a metal detector. But also the coins that were in the film were mine. So it was a very good film, but it's not exactly true history.
Okay. Yeah, I was reading about that some points of in history in the movie are not exactly correct, and as you say, it's fantastic. Know that some pieces of your clothing are in the movie of some parts of the object. It's amazing all that. I don't have idea that about this. This is fantastic to know. And why the researchers of the first researchers that find the objects of Sutton Hoo burials have the idea that was a Viking find and not an Anglo-Saxon for the first time. How this is connect to the Viking world in some point?
Well, initially they thought it was Basil Brown. I think thought it was a Viking ship, but he realised that it wasn't fairly early on. How does it connect to the Viking world? Well, it's 200 years before the advent of the Vikings, so it's late 6th, early 7th century. The histories tell us that the Vikings begin a bit later on, but actually, I mean, the whole things are connected. There's a continuum from that period right up until the 11th century and beyond. These are peoples from the same areas with the same ideas and the same mentality that perhaps that the Vikings had later on. Yeah, the thing is whoever the people were at Sutton Hoo, they would never have referred to themselves as Anglo-Saxons. That's a much later term. They would have been probably called themselves the Wolfingus or something like that. They probably didn't even Bede later on calls them the East Angles, but they probably didn't even use that as a term. They probably used their family name, which was, as far as we can tell, the Wolfingus. And they may be related to the Wolfings who appear in poems like Beowulf, and they were from somewhere in Scandinavia. And there are many links between the stuff at Sutton Hoo and other burials in England to finds that we find in Scandinavia and northern Germany and Holland and other places too. But there's some particularly close parallels to stuff found in Sweden, in around Uppsala and Vendel. So they worshipped very similar gods with very similar names. So there were very strong links to the later Vikings, or the people we call the Vikings anyway.
Oh, That's very, very interesting. Know that have we saw that many aspects of Germanic period continued in the Viking Age. And that is I will put this photo that was reminding me. It's the helmet here. And you participate, I think that me remember is in a Denmark TV documentary about Odin. And one of the most curious part is that have an article that you make that was about an eye for Odin.
Yeah,
And is interesting because have some point in this piece, like in the helmet, in the eye,
yeah.
the for say more in more aspect that have some connection with the idea of Odin that the eye exactly was made in some part of this helmet to say that was a reference of Odin or Wotan for the period.
Well, in England, he's called Woden. He probably was called Woden in Scandinavia at that time. So the Scandinavians lose the w a little bit later on. But when we were researching this helmet, and I was actually writing my first book called Woden's Warriors, which has disappeared into, you can't get it anymore. But if you would like a PDF, I can send, well, you can download it. It's for free on one of the academia sites. I noticed a report that was curious about the eyebrows. The archaeologists had noticed this. This wasn't me who first noticed that there was a difference in the eyebrows. This one has, you probably can't see it here, but this one, all the garnets have gold foils behind to reflect the light. These ones never had. And I made the suggestion that this was a link to the story of Odin giving his eye for a drink from the well of wisdom. And when we began to look, we found much, evidence that a version of that story must have been known at least 600 years before it was written down, because there are other objects, not just the helmet, but in the Eye for Odin paper, Neil Price and I mentioned several other things. But what we think happened with this particular helmet is that they went through a ritual where they actually probably removed that eye and put it somewhere sacred and replaced it. And of course, in the Swedish archaeological site of Upokra in southern Sweden, they have in a sacred niche in the first pagan temple that was ever archaeologically identified, they found a helmet eyebrow, which is of a different design, but a similar thing seems to have happened there. But we keep finding objects now that have, from this period, that have altered eyes. There's lots of them now, so it's not just this helmet. And at Sutton Hoo, it isn't just the helmet either. There's I think I sent you a picture of the original face from this thing. Now this has 8 faces, 4 at the bottom, 4 at the top. It's been called a whetstone. It's been called a scepter. It's possibly a scepter. It's not a whetstone. But the faces at the bottom all had beards. The faces at the top are probably of females. Well, actually, one of the faces at the bottom doesn't have a beard, but he's got a square jaw. But one of the faces, face B1, as it's labelled in the archaeological report, has had its left eye removed very, very carefully. And nobody had seen that before. When this was being made by a sculptor, master sculptor, Brian Ansell, he and his friend took lots of photos of the original. He was allowed to work with the original and take measurements. And during the making, we found out lots of things about this object. But the most important thing, perhaps, is that that eye was carefully removed. So I now call this the Woden stone. I don't, others can if they want to, but I think all the faces, the male and the female faces, are possibly references to the god Woden. I will write about that a bit more later, but when I get around to it, I'm involved in another project at the moment. We did write a book about the making of this called Remaking the Sutton Hoo Stone, but sadly our publisher is no longer, he's very ill, and those books are no longer available. But there's some excerpts of it available on my academia pages and on ResearchGate. But
fantastic.
So I mean, there are other things at Sutton Hoo too, which probably pertain to the story of Odin. By the way, on the helmet, there are other stories of Odin that are related. I believe I wrote another paper called "What Color Are God's Eyes," which you can download for free, which goes into more detail. But there's the story of Odin, the much later story of Odin wanting to drink to become a poet. He wants to drink the mead of poetry, and the mead is owned by a giant called Suttung, who won't give it to him, but he knows where it is. And it's a very long story, but to cut it short, he turns himself into a snake, and on this helmet we have a snake, a serpent, and he wriggles down a hole and he finds it. Presumably he turns back into his man shape. He takes the mead in his mouth. He doesn't swallow it, but Suttung knows he's there and he chases him. And in order to escape, Odin turns into an eagle and flies away. And here we have a face, but it's also a bird. It turns into a bird. You've got the wings, the tail, the body, the head. It's a rather curious eagle, if it is an eagle, because it's got teeth, but he's a divine eagle, so he can do what he likes. But and there's more, but I think the case for the helmet being a reference to that god is pretty strong, pretty compelling.
Oh, that's very interesting. I don't know where I listened that, but you say that is a bird, but they say that is a form of a dragon too, or don't have any relation.
Well, I'm absolutely convinced it's a bird. I can't see a case for it being a dragon, but it could be a dragon. I mean, it's the thing about art of this period is when you look at it, you will see different things, and that's intentional. So, there may be lost stories of Odin that we don't know about anymore, where a visual pun is intended. It could, he may have been involved with dragons. We know in the later stories of Odin that there are hints that he could become a woman or appear to be feminine. I mean, he's a shapeshifter. He can be anything he likes, but we don't have those actual stories. They're lost. So it's anything's possible. But when you see art of this period, you have to look at it. I mean, for instance, can you see this?
Yes.
This is one of the shoulder clasps. Now there are two paws at the top. Can you see them?
Yes.
Can you see where their legs cross?
Legs cross
up here where the legs.
Yeah.
Well, that's possibly meant to be a butterfly. So there's more than one image there. I'll send you close-ups so that you can show that. Again, I mean, it really does look like a butterfly to me. I didn't notice that. It was when I was doing a talk somewhere. A lady came up to me afterwards and said, "Paul, have you seen the butterfly?" And I haven't until she mentioned it. But in Mound 17, which is the only other unrobbed grave at Sutton Hoo, they found this. This is obviously a copy. It's a belt buckle. And there was a young man buried there with his horse. Again, the Tudor robbers had tried to rob it, but they dug in the middle of the mound. There was so they missed the graves. There was a horse on one side and a young man on the other. He was wearing this belt. Now, if you can see, there are flying insects depicted on that belt. I'll send you more pictures. Can you see the butterfly, which I think is about there? Can you see it?
Yeah.
4 wings. Now, the other thing about this, of course,
Beautiful.
is he was buried with his horse. And if you look at that shape,
Yes.
it's a horse's head.
Oh, yes. Amazing.
So you always have to look. You have to look very
Wow.
carefully, because there
Fantastic.
might be something hidden that you aren't seeing. And of course, we don't really know what these images meant to them. We can only try and interpret them as best we can. But I think that when the person who owned that helmet put it on, he is no longer who he used to be. He's wearing a mask, and in many societies, when you put a mask on, you become something else. And in Old English and in the Scandinavian languages, a mask is a grim, and that's a by-name for Odin. When he puts that on, he becomes the god, Woden. And, that's a powerful thought if you're on his side. And if you're his enemy, it's not. But the other side may also have had their own Woden, so who knows? But I'm convinced that that's what that's about. Of course, I could be wrong. And people will come along with better ideas, but the evidence for that, I think, is fairly compelling.
Oh, so you can say that he probably was trying to represent Odin in some point for, how can I say, for project the image of Odin for people that
Absolutely.
surround him.
Absolutely. And for whether it was Redwald or one of his relatives, their ancestor was Woden. And so Woden is the ancestor of most kings in England during the 5th to 7th century. I mean, even our present king apparently is descended from Woden, if you look at his king list and go back far enough. So there you go.
Oh, that's fantastic to know that we have a lot of discoveries here in this interview, because it's amazing. I'll just put here one of the image that show me so much attention. That was is here, much more close of the helmet. We saw that have image that's a very close of image of helmets of the period of Vendel period.
Yeah.
And we saw that we have some aspects that are, we can say, like a theatrical representation of some ritual, and this is fantastic to know. How you can say about the image present in the helmet? How you can say that they are presenting for us in the circumstances of the images of present here?
I'm not entirely sure what you mean, but I mean, if people wearing these helmets, they would be striking figures in their time. And we are fairly certain that people wore their very, very best clothes to go to battle, because they wanted to be seen and recognized. Whatever happened, they wanted others to be able to record it and sing their songs in the mead hall. If they die, they want their heroism to be related. If they do magnificent achievements and overcome foes, they want that to be seen and spoken about in poetry. So the other thing is, I mean, of course, when you're wearing these helmets, is no one knows what you're thinking. They can't see you. You're like a robot. You're not human anymore. In fact, perhaps they would regard you as being somewhat supernatural. Most people didn't have these helmets. So and the society that they lived in was geared up for war and heroes and magnificent achievements. That's the other thing about wearing this gear, is that by wearing their best clothes and all this very, very rich stuff, he is telling his enemies that he's actually very good at fighting. That's how he got all this stuff. That's how he got the wealth. And, you know, he's basically trying to outshine his opponents. And if he can do that successfully, then the other side might think, well, you know, well, hold on, these are really tough people. Perhaps there's a way around this. Perhaps we can give them tribute or something else and they'll go away or whatever. But the armor, jewelry is sending a message. That's what it's doing, even to his own people. You know, he's telling you that he is. I mean, rich people do this today, don't they? They go around in their very posh cars. They wear very expensive watches and suits and things. Except that in this time, everything is geared towards the military and martial power, whereas rich people today tend to be a bit more peaceful. I think. I hope. Although there may be exceptions.
That's fantastic. And the details of the knots in the helmet are fantastic, because we saw that this art continue appear in the Viking Age too and other periods, and that's one of the most fantastic things to see, that are many aspects connections these two words in many some points, and this is amazing. So that. And here for for me, one of the most beautiful parts of the construction of the character is the sword. For me, sword is amazing, and the part here in the poem is fantastic, because we saw that some aspects of the sword have the jewels and the here in, how can I say, here is the part of the blade, and is a work that we don't see a lot in many of swords in the period. Can you explain about how this work of the construction of the
You mean
swords?
the blades?
Yes.
Okay, easily, I think. The pattern, this is what we call pattern welding. I mean, in some places it's called Damascus or Damascene, but it's not really. That's quite different. But the smith will select. They were very good at knowing what irons were used, were good for different parts of the sword, and they knew a hell of a lot about iron. Some of which probably exceeds what we know. The edge is made from a different metal. That's usually hard, and it's usually what we would call steel, if ideally. And that's a separate piece which is welded onto the center, but only after the center has been made. I don't know if you can see this. I don't know. There are 4 bars running the length of the sword. 1, 2, 3, 4. And each one of those has 7 different layers of either dark or bright colored iron. So low carbon iron or phosphorus or nickel iron would be the bright iron. Those are what they're welded into. They all start off as a piece of iron about the size of my palm. And then those 7 layers are put together. They're welded in the fire with heat and with the hammer. Then they're drawn out into long bars. I've actually got one downstairs, but I'll send you pictures of it. Until you've got 4 of them. Then those 4 are whatever pattern the smith decides. In this case, he's gone for straights, twists, straights, twists, all the way down the sword. He twists where it's needed, and then once that's done, the 4 bars are welded together, ready to become the center of the sword. Now, if you can see this, I can't see. Oh yeah, where it's straight on this side, see those straight bars? If you look at the other side, it's twists. So it's actually 2 layers. So what the smith does, and it was Vince Evans who made this blade for him, an American smith, he went to the British Museum, and they worked with us on and giving us all the information and letting us look at the original. He realized that once those 4 bars in the middle are made, they're then cut along the thin edge, so you've got 2 lots, and then they're offset and re-welded back together to make the center of the sword, and then the edge, the harder iron, the steel, is added. So it's quite a complex process. We wrote a book about swords. If I can find it. Unfortunately, again, our publisher is ill, and he's not fulfilling orders, but we are hoping to redo the book. Oh, here it is, right in front of my eyes. This has got a lot about patterns and all sorts in there. It's a good book, even if I do say so myself. But unfortunately, you can't get it at the moment. But some of that is, there are extracts from it on my academia page and ResearchGate pages.
Oh, that's nice. The sword for me is one of the most beautiful of these finds, because we saw that they have jewels in the part of the bar of the case of the sword, and this is fantastic. How techniques they use to color these jewels? Because we saw some jewels have this have some colors.
Well, if you look at these, this the red is garnets, but the other colors are glass. I don't know. Can you see the little glass sections where the blue and white?
Yeah.
They're what they did was they got rods of different colored glass, put them together, heated them up so they stick together, a bit like making a sword, and then they pull them out until they're the right size that they want, and then they cool them, and then they cut slices out of them, and then they use, that's called millefiori, and 1,000 pieces, I think, and they end up in jewelry like this, and some of it's just blue glass. But if you want any pictures of any of those, I can send them to you, no problem at all.
No, thank you. One of the pieces of, I think, is in the structure here in the belt. Just a moment, I will put the image just for show you, is this, and we saw a lot of details that here in the presence here in the gold part. How you can say about the construction of this part specifically, and how this work we can just close here in the part of the bucket, how we can this is work. I don't see so much things that show how this part works. Do you can explain for us how?
Sure. The whole belt buckle is made of I think 18 different pieces. There are pins, and if you push those pins, you can disassemble the whole thing. It's quite a feat of engineering. It's a very clever thing. If you look on the back, there are these 3 latches. Now, if you push those in to the center, the belt will open, just like that.
Oh.
So everything is gold. It's solid gold. So these pins here are actually quite weak, and some people thought it was too weak to be a belt buckle, but it does actually work. And what you do is you get what we did. I mean, we don't really know what they did, because when they found this, they found nothing inside that was worthy of looking at. Just dust, I suppose. But if it was found now, it would be minutely examined, but they didn't do that. They emptied it out. But what we do is we have a piece of wood that goes in there and shaped to those curves. Now, those curves are actually pretty strong. And you wrap either a textile or a leather belt or whatever else you're using around that, sew it together. I should have brought that in, but it's out in my shed. And then you put it on. There's a hole that goes over there, so there's no stress on the pin. Then you close it and you lock it, and that now won't open, and it becomes a belt buckle. But you can have, you can have a belt for evening wear, you can have a belt for going to war, you can have a belt for whatever you like. But it's ever so easy to change. All you do is that.
Oh, that's fantastic. I was very curious to know how this worked, because I think that was have to pass some structure in this part here. Yes, I was thinking that was have to pass, but it's open and close. I don't have idea that this is work like that.
It's very, very clever. I mean, there's quite a lot of careful engineering in some of the bits. For instance, this is from the sword belt, and this is what's called a dummy buckle. And because although it looks like it's got a tongue which pierces anything, it's not. It just slides. So when it's on your sword, it just holds itself in place by tension. And they even put garnets on places where they're not really going to be seen. This is one of my favorite bits of the whole. This is the strap divider at the back, and it goes that way and it goes that way. So whoever did this knew what they were doing. And again, I mean, on the barrel of that, where hardly anybody's ever going to see, they put garnets. And on the side of the belt buckles, these garnets are very, very small indeed. If you were working one of those and dropped it, you're never going to find it. So how they achieved all this, it's difficult to understand. We suspect they had means of magnification. In fact, we're pretty sure they did. But again, I mean, if you look at the back, it's very carefully made. And some of the jewels they've all got reflective foils, but I don't know if you can see in this one, they've actually got two different types of reflective foil. So the light hits your eyes at different ways. Some of the garnets are slightly different colors, not on my reproduction, but on the original, in order to create even more visual effects. But this buckle the tongue is straight and doesn't move, which makes it very easy to do up when you're trying to do it up around your I've got rather a fat tummy, so it's quite handy. But it's all very nicely made. Now this thing here, remember I said about looking at things with more than once. This we call the wolf jaw, because if you look at it, it's sort of a wolf's head. It's got teeth, and if you look at the ears up here, I don't know if you can see, but I will send you photos. There's actually little wolves within the ears. Can you see?
Yeah, I see.
They're very keen on these little details. Now, as I say, we don't really know what it meant to them. We can only guess and try and work stuff out as best we can. So that's what we do. There are also, I mean, some very nice little pots made of burr walnut.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Now, we don't know what these were used for. They may be for drinking small amounts of liquid or for creams or whatever. But these are replicas of little things that were in the grave, which are not often mentioned, but they're very beautiful little pots. Send you pictures.
Yes, it's fantastic. It's amazing to see that. And from one of the pieces that was beautiful too is the shield. We saw that have figures in the shield of
The shield.
Yes, the shield.
Yeah. What shield in Portuguese?
Shield in Portuguese is escudo.
Of course. Yes, yes.
And it's amazing because we saw some figures in the part of front of the shield, and we have like a bird, we can say an eagle
Yeah.
or a raven. What this represent in the shield? What is occurring in the scene
Well, it
present there?
may be an echo of what's on the helmet face, but I'm not terribly sure. I mean, various people have suggested things, but I've never found any of them very convincing. But it's a bird of prey, but on the back of its head, there's another bird coming out. So what that's all about, I don't know. Within the imagery of the bird, there's other images buried. Some very weird images, heads with wings. But on the hip of the bird, there is a man's face. I think I sent you a picture of that. If I haven't, I will. There's a man's face on that hip. Now, you get similar images that have been found, nowhere near as elaborate, but we get similar images in both that have been dug up in Denmark and in southern Sweden. And I can send you pictures of those too. Of birds with men's faces on their hips. So I think that's harking back to that man's face on the helmet, where it transforms from a man into an eagle. And I suspect that is the shield imagery of the bird with a man's face on its hip is about the same thing. But there are many other images on that design. And then you've got the other creature on the shield, the long thing with lots of legs, which is usually interpreted as a dragon. And it may well be. I really don't know. But every part of that shield is embellished. All the metal parts are embellished with lots and lots of hidden details. On the actual surround of we call the center of the shield the boss. I think it might be umbo. I don't know what it is in Portuguese, but in Italian it's an umbo. And on the surround around there, the designs show horses with locked legs. And in fact, you've got the same design on the purse, or a similar design. You see here at the top. Now they're horses and their legs cross. Now there are burials where they put horses in graves and they've interchanged all their legs. And when you get the bones with all the tiny bits and things, they look a bit like those things. So quite what all that's about, I don't know. There's so much we don't know. And it's really good fun trying to understand stuff. But there were some things, you know, as I said, that are perhaps revealing themselves. So that's really quite useful until someone comes along with a better idea.
Oh, that's great to know that. It's possible to see the image of the shield is appearing for you.
I can't get it in. It's this room is full of books and quite small, and I wouldn't be able to show you the shield. I can send you whatever pictures you like, but I can't get it in here, I'm afraid.
Okay, no problem. But is appearing when I put here in the screen the photo. I put here the photo of the that you sent me. It's
okay. I can't see it, so
okay. Let me see here just to show. Just a moment. I will put here.
oh yeah, that's me. That's me at Sutton Hoo a couple of years ago. It was a very hot day, really hot. But you can see those like lozenges that go across the shield. The designs on those are almost exactly the same as similar ones on a shield from Vendel in Sweden, grave 12. They're almost exactly the same. I'll send you pictures of both of them, line drawings. So there's a real strong link to that shield. Whether they were made in Sweden or England or somewhere else, I don't know. Personally, I think they were probably made in what we now call Lower Sweden, Skåne, places like Pokra. But we know both at Gamla Uppsala and in Sweden and in England at a place called Rendlesham, not far from Sutton Hoo, we know they had garnet workshops. So they're making jewelry at both of those places. Whether they're making the shields there or not, I suspect they probably were. But they may have been made. Some bits on that shield and the bits on the Vendel 12 shield were almost certainly made by the same craftsman. So there's a very strong link.
That's fantastic. And here we have, let me put here other image that I was very curious to show you, that I was asking me what this representation of in the, can I say, we have a figure here. Just a moment. Do you see the picture?
Yeah, I can see the picture. I can see where the arrow is pointing.
Yeah, I was very curious. How you can see about the symbol of the animal present here? That was oh, let me remember. I don't remember in English the name of this animal. My God, what's the name?
Dragon?
No, here in this structure that was here with these horns.
Oh, the aurochs. You mean the drinking horns? I haven't got them in that photo. I actually don't have any drinking horns, but they have been made, and I often have them on when I'm there, but they're not mine. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, just a moment, let me see here is the name is the deer.
The deer.
The deer in the structure of
oh, here. You mean this?
Yes.
Oh, it's the deer is beautiful.
Yes, very beautiful. And I was very curious about how because why this was put in the structure of the
stone.
Yes, of this part, circular part, have some aspect religious, have some symbol about that. How you can say about this structure?
Well, we don't know, to be honest. As I say, a chap called Steve Pollington and I wrote a book about the making of this, and together with the makers, Dave Roper made all the metalwork, and Brian Ansell made the stone. It's made from exactly the same materials as the original. The people who did the report, the lady who was responsible for part of the report, was always doubtful that this particular piece, the iron ring and the stag, came from here. However, when we examined with Brian Ansell the geometry of this whole thing, and that we found that there were more than 28 coincidences of measurement between these things and this. This curve has a particular radius, a particular arc. It's part of a circle which is 16 foot 4 inches in diameter, which is about 4 meters. and that was an old measurement called the rod, the pole, or the perch, used for laying out buildings in later medieval period. It wasn't always exactly that measurement. Sometimes it's slightly more, slightly less. But this stag, that body there, is exactly the same width as this stone at its widest point.
Oh.
The spread of the antlers is, again, exactly the same width as the stone. In fact, there are many things which relate to that measurement. If you produce the curve of the stone on both sides, it ends up in the center of that circle. There's just lots and lots of things, but so it belongs here. Besides that, the bronze on this bit and on this bit were analyzed. They were found. This was broken off. Is exactly the same. Comes from exactly the same mix as. So it looks like they were meant to be together. So I'm absolutely positive it comes from there. I've got no doubts about that at all. What it means, we don't know. We looked at the amount of stags in the north, and we found quite a lot, but nothing quite like this. But it is a really beautiful piece, just on its own. But what it means, don't know. Not for sure. Maybe it just means kingship. Maybe it's a relation. We know in Beowulf, this is a red deer, a hart, a male red deer. And in Beowulf, the Hrothgar's hall is called Heorot, which is hart, which is a stag. But so maybe it's a symbol of royalty, but we've lost the connection sometime, over the years. But it's a phenomenal little piece, really.
Yeah, it's very curious, because I was remember that some aspects in some societies, we have some solar cults, and we have some representation that horses that brings the sun, and they have the circular part with this deer. I was imagining some point like that of the scepter.
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, it has been suggested that this is about the sun. It's not a bad idea. Perhaps it is. But that's the fun of this period and all this stuff, because people can still make valuable contributions, and some of the ideas that we've come up with may be wrong, but we can only, if they find another one of these, and they haven't so far, that would be really helpful, and it might give us more clues as to what this stuff is. I think that this is really an idol. I think it's possibly something that carries the power of the gods, and if it is a Woden stone, perhaps the power of Woden. The only stories we've got of whetstones really in the Norse mythology are to do with Thor, and I've forgotten what all that was about, but I think we wrote about it somewhere. But I think there are a couple of other references to whetstones, but nothing like this. It stands up by itself, by the way, which is quite nice.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's very, very curious. And Mr. Mortimer, for my last question is about this a piece of kit that was here. I will put the image to show you. What is represented? This I think it's a spoon. I can say it's a spoon.
Yeah. The spoons.
Yeah.
Now, there are many things in that grave that I haven't reproduced. These are Byzantine spoons. They're actually not exactly common in posh graves, but they do occur both here and on the continent. None as far as I know in Scandinavia, but maybe they are. I just don't know about them. But there were two, and I've always thought it was very neat because the name written on them is Paul, which is my name, Paulos. It's possible the other one says Saulos, Saul, but I think most recently scholars think that that's just a botched job of writing Paul. But yeah, I've always thought they're actually pretty impractical. I think they're described in the literature as christening spoons or baptismal spoons. So, but you can't really eat with them. But they are nice objects, and they're made of solid silver, so they're quite nice. And there's the name. Can you see?
Yeah. Oh, have a name
Yeah.
here. Yes, it's very, very interesting. We can say that the spoon is for eating something, or they have some
Don't know.
implications.
No, they have this strengthening bar at the back. Most of them have that. I mean, not just the ones at Sutton Hoo, but pretty much all the ones. If you go to the British Museum, there are several from other graves, but they're always this shape. They've got the rod coming down, a circular piece there, and which is attached to the bowl, welded onto the bowl. Quite why, I don't know. I haven't made a great study of those, but they are nice. So, and they go in my box with the purse for transporting.
Oh, that's interesting. And here in the image have another object too that was very interesting. That is, I think he is part of this big one here. That
Oh, the
was,
purse.
yeah, he is connected, I think, to the port. Yes, it's amazing, this object. We have some representation is in that we have some birds. We have, I think, a representation that was exactly the same in the Torslunda helmet, and this is very, very curious because the image was very close to the Scandinavian founds of this that have a man with the two creatures in his sides.
I'm trying to show you the coins, but I'm failing. But within the purse, there were found 37 gold coins, 3 blanks, and a couple of gold ingots. And I have those too. I've just dropped one somewhere. Oh, there it is. But yeah, we've tried to do things as accurately as possible. That was all that was in the purse, these coins. Nothing else. Again, it's a good piece of engineering. It only works as little. We've added nothing to this. Roper worked out how this works. Just a little slider, closed. Now it's locked, and to open it, just lift it up. Very clever little piece of very, very clever engineering. They knew stuff. I mean, they were really not just at Sutton Hoo, but all over the world at this time. There were very good engineers who knew how to do things. Very good craftsmen. You know, it's been called the Dark Ages, but whoever they were, their societies had people who were trained to do things and do them to a very high standard. And that was everywhere, not just in England.
Yes, it's fantastic because sometimes we have the ideas that it's I think ideas that was created about this app of like a barbarian app, or they don't have ideas to do these things, but they are so intelligent, so creativity, and this is fantastic to saw.
They were sophisticated, organized societies, and they did, you know, they weren't averse to killing each other, but that's where the barbarism comes in, I suppose. But they were highly intelligent, highly capable of doing all sorts of things.
This is fantastic, and you're showing all these things. It's amazing. And I have to thank you a lot for doing the
My pleasure.
interview, to show your objects. It's amazing. So that I'm really, really fan of your work. I watch many times that you present your as a reenactor, you represent this character, and this is it's fantastic. It's amazing. It's like see a reincarnation of this character of that period. And thank you so
Very
much
kind. Thank you.
for doing this interview. I just stopped the recording now. Just a moment.